ESPN have just released a hot list of 2020. The top 10 best fighters, like best records over the 2020 period. So I've decided in no particular order to list my top 10 2020 fighters this year. I don't think ESPN have done a great job. They just stuck a load of champions at the top and not really put much thought into it. But I thought I would do the opposite, put a load of thought into it and probably irritate the masses. But you know what? That's what you got to do. We start off with Charles Oliveira. I've already shouted my praises for him in multiple videos, but Charles Oliveira, he's an incredible fighter. Like, his 2 fights this year, the way he absolutely dismantled Tony Ferguson a couple of months ago, putting him to the ground and pound, basically breaking his arm, to then earlier in the year in UFC Brasilia, before the whole pandemic happened, for him to do what he done to Kevin Lee. Completely high pressure, really like in his face, and then eventually take him to the ground, of course catch him in that leg lock, which ultimately ended the 5-round fight. But of course Charles Oliveira's had an incredible 2020. He's set himself up for the title shot, if that's going to be against Khabib, if that's going to be Poirier and Conor McGregor, whoever that's against, Charles Oliveira has to be the one to fight for the title. To ultimately being cut after Dana White's Container Series, and to come back and fight Thiago Santos like he did a couple of years ago, coming in number 9 is Kevin Holland. Yes, the opponents he's fought this year are probably not on par to some of these top contenders who I'm going to list later in the video, but Kevin Holland definitely deserves a mention in the top 10 list of 2020. A 5-round winning streak with notable wins over Darren Stewart and the likes of Jacare Souza cannot be questioned. And including that is performances. Like, we can't forget how he knocked out Jacare Souza on his back, hitting him upwards. Like, not many fighters have the power to be able to knock someone out on their back. 2021 set him up against a top opponent, maybe against one of the next people I'm going to mention in this video. Coming in at number 8 is the guy who everyone said was the new Khabib before he beat Rhys McKee, before he beat Gerald Meerschaert and showed how dominant he can be. He didn't get hit. The quickest turnaround between 2 fights, only taking about 4 or 5 punches over 3 rounds against 2 different opponents, mind you. Khamzat Chimaev, the guy who everyone knows his name now, is number 8 in this list. Of course, this list isn't in no particular order, but his impressive performance, while the light goes out, it has to be mentioned. He's had a brilliant 2020, a brilliant welcome to the UFC, and now he fights against Leon Edwards at the start of next year. A brilliant test for his abilities. It's a real technical test between Leon Edwards and Chimaev, where they could probably bring the best out of each other. I'm leaning towards Leon Edwards, but Chimaev, you can never count him out. He's proved that in his last 3 fights that he's always going to be there. But an impressive 2020, an impressive debut, and that's how he lands himself into this list. After being knocked out in 2019 twice, he's made a massive comeback 2020 on a 4-fight win streak and beating the likes of Greg Hardy and Ben Rothwell, guys who have got good records against other guys who are very notable fighters. What a 2020 it has been for Marcin Tybura. Knocked anyone out other than Greg Hardy this year, but he's had a very dominant performance, pressing him against the cage, throwing in those hooks, throwing in those good combinations. Just pure dominant performances. And that is how you're going to raise yourself against the ranks. And coming into a 2021, a very exciting year for the UFC, it's going to be interesting to see who he gets put up against next Is it going to be kind of a less known opponent, or is he going to go up against a giant? If he gets put up against a Junior Dos Santos or a Rosenstruik or someone like that, someone notable. Even Derek Lewis, as the Curtis Blade fight hasn't been put together yet. It'd be interesting to see who his next opponent is, to see what level he truly is, if he can go up against top guys. Because he doesn't have like the best resume before 2020, but he's really shown up this year. So it's going to be interesting. Robert Whittaker. Although he only had 2 fights in quick succession, what are 2 fights he had. Coming in at number 6, we've got Robert Whittaker. And what a 2020 it was. From him getting knocked out by Israel Adesanya to him winning the 2 fights in 20 in quick succession of each other, to then getting himself a guaranteed title or interim shot. Of course, his first fight of the year was against Darren Till, which was a very back and forth affair, but of course he really pushed Darren Till out of his comfort zone, of course, taking him down, pressing him, high pressure. Even though Darren Till did bring it, but the even more impressive performance was against Jared Cannonier, where he completely obliterated Cannonier. The guy who everyone said, oh, he's going to knock out Whittaker. To come out there and Whittaker to really show who's boss, who's king of the rest. Out of Adesanya, Whittaker is the best of the rest. And it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do with Robert Whittaker. What I would personally say in 2021 is get that interim shot against Costa, or if Gastelum picks up a few wins to finally get that fight happening again. But I don't know. I think Costa is the best route. Even though if Costa suddenly knocks out Robert Whittaker, we don't want to see Costa fight against Adesanya again. That completely blows it out of the water and we're like, middleweight shit. Who thought coming into this year we'd have 2 Polish guys mentioned in this video? But the other guy coming in at number 5 has to be Polish power, Jan Blachowicz. Other than Joanna Jędrzejczyk has really put Poland on the map. I'd say more even. What a 2 fights this year. Maybe not the title fights or the big fights what people would expect him to win and all that. Of course, his first fight very early on, but he knocked out Corey Anderson quite convincingly, basically to set up that fight against John Jones. Of course, John Jones moved up to heavyweight or whatever he's doing, you know, he's doing what John Jones does. And then the Dominic Reyes fight. Everyone thought Reyes was going to absolutely walk over Jan. But of course, Jan knocks him out convincingly. And now he's basically set up a fight against Israel Adesanya, like a super fight. In 2021, I believe March, it's been confirmed. And that is one hell of an exciting fight. But as I sip my coffee, we're here to talk about why he's in this list. And of course, the convincing performance, let me move that out of the way, the convincing performance against Reyes 100% gets him into this list. To make himself light heavyweight champion, and now he's got a big fight against Adesanya to prove himself. But then again, he doesn't need to prove himself. He's been the best of the rest when Jones was champion, and I think it's another one to hit to his resume where we'll probably go over the fight later, probably next year even. So now, this is the controversial one coming in at number 4. It is Dan the Hangman Hooker, and you probably think I'm crazy. But the reason why I've put him in this list is probably one of his fights are going to get fight of the year. Of course, earlier on in the year, he had a beautiful fight against Paul Felder, very back and forth affair, and he won by split decision, which I would say he won unanimously, but a very back and forth fight, exhilarating, exciting. Of course, him throwing those knees, very unorthodox striking style Dan Hooker has at some points in the fight. And then of course another fight of the year contender, which is against Dustin Poirier. The guy's fighting McGregor, potentially fighting for the title and stuff. And yes, Poirier won it quite convincingly, but the reason why I'm putting him in this list is because he's had a very exciting 2020. And I am assuming that Dan Hooker is going to have a brilliant 2021 as well. Of course, he's lined up to fight Michael Chandler, which came out of nowhere. But of course, I think he runs over Chandler, to be honest, unless Chandler brings this different energy, what no one's ever expected. I don't think Dan Hooker really has a problem, considering Dan Hooker is decent on the ground, even though he doesn't really use that, and he's good in the clinch because he's got those knees, and very unorthodox with the elbows and stuff, kind of like a tall Tony Ferguson style. But Dan Hooker's had a really good 2020 despite losing to Dustin Poirier. He's still in that top 5. Dustin Poirier is a very notable opponent. Like, he's going into 2020, so hard to say it for some reason, 2021, ready, set, and yeah, I think lightweight is such a stacked division. You can put anyone in that top 5 who's had quite a few fights this year. You can put any of them in this list, but that's how it works. Coming in at number 3 is Neil Magny. Maybe not the opponents, but you got to remember Chimaev, Marcin Tybura, and Kevin Holland are all in this list. I don't see why Neil Magny shouldn't. He's chained together some good wins. Of course, set himself a fight against Chiesa to really put him on the map. Neil Magny's one of those guys who's always been in the UFC. He's been in the UFC since like 2012, 2013 time, back the UFC 100 days. But Neil Magny's in this list mainly because of the reason the others. He's had a really good 2020. I believe he's had about 3 fights. Obvious one is the easy win against Robbie Lawler. But it's him putting himself on the map to get to the point where he is. Of course, if he chains together more wins, you never know, he could be fighting for the title. And that's the whole point of a hot list. Is the golden oldie Glover Teixeira. Reason why I put him here is because, well, even though Adesanya has kind of scapegoated himself to light heavyweight and got that title shot against Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira has set himself a title shot after that. Of course, a dominant KO over Anthony Smith. What isn't really the notable one? The complete domination performance against Thiago Santos. A beautiful submission. Caught him in the choke on the ground. That sets him up. Like, the guy who was supposed to be fighting against Jan, Thiago Santos, what a fight that would be. And then the golden oldie steps in and takes over the mantle. The 41-year-old has to be mentioned in this. He has to be in contention for one of the top performances, even though he only had 2 fights where everyone says, oh, you got to have 4 fights to be fighter of the year and all that bollocks. Glover Teixeira is 41 years old and he's still contending. Number 1 contender, mind you. He can't be writ off anymore. Coming into these fights, people saying he's got no chance, and just being writ off by the betting people, all the commentators and stuff. That's got to stop. The guy has an amazing resume. He's got power in his fists, in his stand-up. You can't play around with him on the feet. And then on the ground, it's the exact same with a brilliant jiu-jitsu and wrestling resume. The guy is the complete package. If you look at his resume and how he fights and stuff, he's the perfect fighter in a way, because every round you take him in, he's extremely dangerous, and that's where he potentially could become one of the oldest light heavyweight champions, if not champions in general in the UFC. And that's where 2021 is going to be really interesting to see once he finally gets that title shot. Notable mentions. Of course, I wrote down a list of about 15 guys who I think should all be in this list. So the guys who I don't say are in the top 10, but have to be mentioned. Davison Figueiredo, what a year he has had. Of course, beating Benavidez, becoming the champion, beating Perez in convincing fashion he did, and of course that 5-round war with Moreno, like, him not being mentioned is criminal. Merab Devalashi, he's had a very good year. He's picked up some wins, really pushing him up there into contention. Marlon Vera, he's made a name for himself, although he did lose to Aldo. He beat the Sean O'Malley, and like, he put himself on the map. Jose Aldo, even maybe not 2020 year, but he's also kind of proven himself to be. And of course, not to be forgotten, Israel Adesanya. What a year he has had, getting that 20-0 record and that knockout against Paulo Costa. Just want to say the video corrupted at this point, so I just want to say Gilbert Burns got the last pick. So if you like this video, like, subscribe, and peace.